welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Mate,
Second podcast, first one in the studio.
This is brilliant. I love it. I think this is just showing your intention to resource and support and encourage, and it's fantastic. It's brilliant to be here.
I appreciate it, and thanks for making the journey.
A pleasure.
How have you been? I've been following you on Instagram for a while, obviously before and since the pod. You're putting out some good content, but it looks like you're getting into some. You're working with big organisations, aren't you? Some real nice organisations that are making a big impact on kids' lives.
Yes, I just consider it all an immense privilege. I think gone is the day when it was kind of the old boys network and you got in. I think if people are showing good quality value, people like yourself, you get in and there's a good conversation. I think that we are starting to recognise that there aren't simplistic answers to a lot of the challenges that good organisations are facing. In your context, great gymnastic organisations from local clubs up to big organisations, big national governing bodies. There aren't simplistic tick box answers to some of the more complex conversations that people are having. And I think people are hungry to be resourced in how to have difficult conversations well, because I think we recognise it's a skill that perhaps as a society, maybe we never had, but we certainly don't have now. Yeah. And we're certainly not encouraging coaches, parents, young people to develop well. So yeah, it's just a privilege to be involved and invited into these organisations, not to bring perfect solutions, but to bring an opportunity to curiosity around conversations.
Yeah, and recognising the fact that part of relationships is that they're a bit messy sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah, completely. And sport is messy anyway, and then you put into the fact that it's also highly emotional. Yeah. That makes conversations really tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. And then throw in more emotion through an event which might be taking place or a decision, another difficult conversation. You've got like a perfect storm, really, haven't you, for conflict at the end of the day?
Yeah, exactly. And I think firstly, I would always say there is going to be conflict. And we're certainly not into conflict avoidance, nor are we into kind of suppressing that emotion. What we're trying to do is, I think for parents and coaches, is trying to be adults in the room around a child and a young person, and understand how our emotions impact our behaviour and manage that in a way that's helpful for everyone around us, and recognise, most importantly, we want to be helpful for the young person or the child in the centre of this like perfect storm of emotion, so that we can be as helpful as we can. Not perfect, no one's going to do it perfectly, but so we can be as helpful as we can in the midst of that. And I reckon if you look at gymnastics coaches training courses, how much of that would be on difficult and challenging conversations? I suspect, like lots of other industries, very little really. And yet actually the one-to-one conversations that coaches will have with athletes or parents will fill up a huge significant amount of their time. And so the technical element of that, of course, that's really important that coaches learn that, but how you deliver that, how you work with that, how you support failure, how you support challenge, how you support a difficult stretching session, and I'm going to probably say the word stretching lots in this, and that's no pun intended for
like gymnastics. Challenging, you mean?
Challenging, but stretching conversations, challenging conversations are part and parcel of sport. Yeah. And so how do we resource parents and coaches to understand the power dynamics and have those well with each other?
And the stakes are quite high, because if you have one or two difficult conversations, they don't go very well, then the impact of that could be quite significant for a club or for a parent. It might mean that the parent comes to the conclusion that they're going to take their child elsewhere. It could be really significant in that sense, that you might have invested years and years into a working relationship with these kids, and then one bad conversation, they're gone because the tone was wrong or that not enough trust had been built. I talk a lot about the reservoir of trust that you have to build over time. And if you haven't done enough of that, then it doesn't take many bad conversations before parents start to look elsewhere, which is difficult.
Yeah, it is. And I think sometimes parents will be gracious and will allow there to be little niggles in their child's, in your context, gymnastic journey.
Sure.
And then there's that bigger conversation that's soured, and then all of a sudden all those little niggles, which they thought they had the grace to kind of just roll with, actually then are also imputed into that one issue. And all of a sudden you've got a massive issue. Whereas actually if you'd built in good stops and checks along the way, and to help both parents and coaches be able to express where they're at and what's working and what isn't working for them, that those things would have been dealt with. And like you say, that then when there is that big one, hopefully the well of trust is bigger. Because we're all the same, aren't we? If we've been kind of bitten in a conversation by it just makes us tense up. I'm sure we've all met somebody who's reminded us of somebody who once hurt us. They're not the same person, but they've got the same mannerisms, or they're in the same role or something. And we know that like we tense up, we don't trust that person as much because we've been bitten by somebody like this. And that's really unfair on that person because it wasn't them, and they may treat us brilliantly. But there's that human response to kind of go, ooh, I want to protect myself from this. And you need to build up a deep well of trust, because unfortunately it only takes one of those or two of those bitten moments. And trying to teach parents, no organisation is perfect. I work in a number of schools, and part of the challenge within the school environment, particularly perhaps independent schools, is presenting almost this picture perfect representation of the education that they offer children. Of course, it's not picture perfect. No one within the organisation really thinks it's picture perfect, but because it's marketing, and it's the same with sports clubs. You're trying to compete with other sports clubs to get children along. We present this picture perfect presentation, and yet that's not the reality. And I recognise that that's a marketing challenge. And yet, as soon as a parent comes into an organisation, helping them understand, look, we're not perfect, we're good, but we're not perfect. Here's how we know we're good, because we know we're not perfect. And we're going to be good by, we give you these opportunities to speak. We want these opportunities to speak. We want to give your young person opportunities to speak. And yes, that does take more time. But like you've just said, if you've invested years in supporting a young athlete, you don't want that blown out of the water because of the way one competition team selection was handled, or one challenging conversation about performance and development was handled, because you've invested, and not just in the gymnastics of that young person, but you've invested in that person. You care for them. You've enjoyed seeing them grow and develop as a human being. You want to carry on being part of that story. And I think part of the challenge from gymnastics is it's an early maturation sport. So we were chatting about my son who's had a really challenging time with injury, but he's 20 and he's in a sport that is making increasingly physical demands on his body and increasingly stretching and challenging demands on his body. And he is putting himself through the gym at incredible rates of challenge, all supervised and under professional care. And he's loving it and he's thriving, but he's constantly sore, and he's, but he knows the end goal. Now he's 20 and he's able to manage that. Gymnastics asks young people who haven't got the emotional maturity or foresight to understand sometimes part of the physical challenge that comes through the sport. And so it's even more important that I think coaches and clubs and organisations invest in giving parents the space to understand the journey and realising, yes, this does take time, and we're all time short, time poor. But if we invest that now, hopefully in the long term, because we know gymnastics hemorrhages kids at 13, just like swimming does. We want to stop that hemorrhage. We've got to do better at holding kids to being active. And I think, when I travel around these great organisations you talked about, I'm always curious with coaches, what makes a good athlete when they come here? They often say to me, if we can get a kid who did either gymnastics or martial arts when they were like 3 or 4 to 8 years old, we know their physical literacy is going to be through the roof.
That's interesting. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
No, exactly. So it's that. My own daughter was a gymnast and did acro, and then she kind of fell out of love with it, and her club were brilliant. I can't praise her club enough, particularly during lockdown, with how amazing it was. It was just her time to stop. And then she switched to hockey, and she picked up hockey so quickly, and she was so competitive so quickly because of the physical literacy that she brought from her gymnastics. But she's not playing hockey at a high performance end, nor was she high performance end of gymnastics. But her, but you could see the crossover, and certainly the crossover in high performance sport. And yet my cousin, who was in the England gymnastics squad for a while and potential Olympic pick, he's just had his first son, and he doesn't want his kid to go anywhere near gymnastics.
Interesting.
And I think that's a shame. And so we need to, interestingly, he went into physiotherapy. He's a top sports physio because, bless him, he spent a lot of time injured as a gymnast, and I think that's probably part of his logic for not wanting to go into it. But we want people to leave the gymnastics journey and go, we're gutted it ended, or we're gutted it didn't get to quite the right level, but we love the sport, we love the community, we love the coaches. It was tough at times, but that toughness was good. And so we need to be having conversations to help resource that.
Love it. You mentioned before about the fact that we're the adults in the room and we're trying to serve the kids. And I sometimes wonder if what the kids would think if they knew some of the things that as adults we bicker about. Because actually the kids are usually the lowest maintenance. Like, they turn up, they're ready to participate, they enjoy their training, I mean, in the most part. But it's usually all the stuff around the kids which creates the complexity or the frustrations. And I often think, like, what would the kids think if they knew the bickering here that might be going on and the internal politics and this, that and the other? It's like, who are the kids here and who are the adults? Because actually I know which one seems more mature. But there's less emotion, of course, for them because they don't know the involvement of what's going on around them sometimes.
Well, I love that. And I think I've got two things I would say about. One, I think the kids are knowing more and more because parents are showing less and less discipline about when they talk about their frustrations with organisations.
Right.
Like, part of being the adult in the room is not going, I can't believe the coach said that to them today. Why did the coach say that to you today? I can't believe they did that to you today.
Yeah.
It's actually talking to your partner or a trusted friend or another family member to say, I was really frustrated with the gym club today. And then that trusted friend can help you talk it through and see, and hopefully give you a balanced view and help you see it. Whereas actually, I think some of those conversations are happening in front of kids more. So I was at a school recently, they had a big sports tournament. Their school is renowned for this sport. They announced their squads for this festival that was held at their school. And the following morning, the leader coach of that sport had 3 students knock on his door saying, "You're going to get an email from my dad, sir, but just ignore it, don't worry." So there's the kids trying to be adults in the rooms, but they've obviously heard the adult conversation. So I think that's really sad. I think the other thing about helping parents and coaches be the adults in the room is recognizing, I think you're right. I think most times kids crack on with it. They, if given a chance, I think they can grow in confidence and resilience if it's a high supportive environment. And yet there will be times when kids at a gymnastics session are kind of holding together a bit of the challenge and a bit of the stress, and they're holding that together on top of a day of school stress, and so they might get home and they might have a bit of a teary cry because they're knackered and it's been a long day and they haven't probably had quite enough calories and they're a little bit hangry, and so they have a little bit of an offload and they're just like, ugh. And that's where parents need to be adults in the room and go, okay, that's it. We've just had a bit of a meltdown. I wonder what's going on there. Is it just the end of the day? Is it just really normal kid stuff that actually they've loved it, but it was pressure? And so they need to release that. And that's released as a kind of like a, or some kids, they go hyper. You know, I've got 3 kids and one of my children they're just bouncing off the walls like they've drunk a whole bottle of fizzy, highly sugared and E-numbered drink because they've held together being respectable. And when they get home, they just want to go, But parents misunderstand that and see upset child and go, oh no,
I need to fix it.
Something's really wrong here. I need to email the coach. What happened tonight at coaching? What happened tonight at training? And so where you're completely right, the kid is actually fine, really enjoying it. They just needed a safe space just to let go of some of the pressure. But because they're children, they couldn't sit down and write a nice poem about it. Mum, I've had a difficult day juggling the pressures. I'm going to go and write a poem about how I feel about it. I'm going to go and paint a picture. Yeah, I'm going to go and journal it out. No, they didn't have the skills. And why would they? Because they're 10 or whatever. And they've just gone home and gone, blah. And it's misinterpreted. Now, if your kid's coming home, and I need to be clear about this, if your kid's coming home from every session and going blah, then I would want to be getting more and more curious about that.
Yeah, and if there's some clear red flags.
Clear red flags. And there's, and there might be just red flags, and like they might just be doing too much, or it might be the same coach's name. And then we might need to start some processes thinking about that. But that isn't the first 2 or 3 times that happens. Yeah. That is just a genuine, give them a hug, give them the calories that they're probably craving, try and get them into bed a bit earlier.
Yeah.
Give them a bit of screen time so they can switch off and
decompress
from the day, and then see how they are tomorrow morning, see how they are about training. And if they're going into training happy, then it isn't the panic.
Yeah.
But parents panic. And I think, in society, this is a fairly sweeping statement, but we do seem to be less and less able to handle adversity. We're more nervous about people's pain. We're more nervous about people being stressed and challenged. And maybe that's a good thing because for years, maybe we weren't good about talking about those things. But now I feel that we're better at talking about them, but that talking about them has made us more wary of them rather than embracing. Actually, that's quite normal. I don't know if you've come across some of the work by Jonah Oliver. He's a sports psychologist in Australia. And he's just a fascinating chap, and he talks about the price of the ticket, the price of the admissions ticket to becoming a high performance athlete is actually, you're going to be stressed, you're going to be anxious about injury, you're going to not get on with your teammates, you're going to panic that it could all be over, you're going to panic. That's part of the admission price.
Normal part of the journey.
Normal part of the journey, rather than going, oh, let's pretend none of that exists. Actually, that's okay. So I think clubs allowing kids to have those moments, being really supportive of parents feeling like, oh, they're having a meltdown, and clubs helping parents understand that that's normal, and parents having a space within a club to say, actually, this club do give us good processes for feedback.
Yeah.
So if we need that, we can use that, and this isn't that moment, and how do we kind of work through it, I think is really helping us be adults in the room.
Short interruption. If you're a head coach, club owner, manager, or leader, check out our High Performance Health Check for a free insight into how well your club's operating within our 6-category framework. Head to nickroddick.com/health check to take our 10-minute assessment. We'll send you the results straight to your inbox. Back to the episode.
A lot of this needs time, doesn't it? And again, because of the complexity of gymnastics and the volume of training, and staff are pretty, particularly within gymnastics, you probably see this in a lot of sports, but there's a lack of staff, really. I mean, you can't go into a gymnastics club and find staff just kind of standing around not doing anything. You know, they're all busy, but it almost needs a full-time person working on the culture, working on these conversations, working on building relationships. That's not practical. How do you suggest that clubs really work on that? Because ultimately we can probably look at how much time they're spending reactively of reactive conversations, firefighting, dealing with things because they haven't put an earlier step in. How would you suggest the average club kind of deals with managing the enormous task of making sure these relationships are great? And
well, I think firstly, like you say, I think creating a culture within the coaches of just real encouragement for one another. Like you say, most clubs are existing without the number of staff that they would in an ideal world. So let's just make our coaching team such an encouraging team among ourselves. I'm like, you're doing a great job. Some are volunteers, some are paid, fantastic people doing great work, giving up lots of evenings, lots of hours. So let's just be real encouragers of ourselves. And I think then that environment of collegiate encouragement actually is infectious out of that. I think being honest with the parents, like this is who we are. This is what our resources. I would love to employ 5 more coaches, but we want to keep your fees down. We and so this is how it works. So I think you can be a bit more honest sometimes about the business model, about actually like this is why we can't do that or can do that. I think have a reactive plan, because you are going to have reactive moments. And as you go through a gymnastics season, you'll become more attuned to when that reactive plan is going to need to be used more. And then start to think, are there tools and resources that we can put into place? Are we seeing the same kind of issues come up at the same time of year? Okay, so we're probably not going to get rid of that completely, but what could we be doing a little bit more? I was working in a Premiership football club recently, and they said to me, well, they're player care lead, so they can afford a full-time person on this. But they said, our coaches are getting so cross and angry because the parents are asking the same questions all the time. And I was like, well, that could be because the parents are all awful, or maybe it's you haven't answered the questions appropriately. Oh, no, we do it at the start of the season. I was like, well, then that isn't enough. Yeah. That just isn't enough.
Evidently, it's not enough.
Evidently, it's not enough. And I think in limited resources, so in institutions with limited resources, I think it is okay to say, okay, we've got these hotspots and we can't do anything about them at the moment, so we will have to be reactive. But just blaming the parents for the hotspots, I think, is unhelpful. So have a reactive plan. Train your staff in difficult conversations as best as you can. Have an evening where you role play, practice those conversations, where you think about how might we deal with that email. Have a bit of a script. Have a plan that tries to give a bit of space and is really personal. And I think things like saying thank you for your email when you've received a stonking email is a lie. You don't mean it. So start with the affirmation, and it's an affirmation you can both agree with. You want your child to get the most out of being part of this gymnastics club, okay? And you don't think we're doing that at the moment. Let's meet and then make a couple of suggestions, but make sure those suggestions are 2 or 3 days' time.
Yeah.
down the line where it could all just, don't engage in a keyboard bish bash bosh, because I mean, you might silence the parent, you might get your point across, but you're not then doing that team collegiate thing that we talked about. And if you don't have lots of time, can we chat for 10 minutes here? But make sure
boundaries.
Set boundaries. Pick a time when you're not having loads of kids come off the mat, or or you're trying to register loads of kids at the time. Try and do that, and then work together as a team. I'm seeing parent X. We're going to chat over there. Can you guys do that? So I think protect yourselves. I think institutions don't support their staff well enough by protecting from the hot spots. A parent who's the red mist has fallen about can be a pretty toxic person to engage with, and so staff need to be supported and equipped to that. So that's not fair if you're not giving your staff that support. I was telling my daughter recently that I'm upskilling myself. I'm doing even more difficult training conversations. She's like, "What? You've been able to speak since you were 2, and you say far too much, Dad. What do you need to learn to speak about?" It's like, because this is a skill like any other skill. It's like learning to do the splits is a skill. Learning to do a roly-poly is a skill. Learning to deal with a difficult conversation is a skill. None of us like to deploy that skill, but it is a skill set.
And it needs practice as a result of that, and training and framework probably.
Yeah, all of that. And you can do little snippets of that regularly and well. And the beauty, Neil, about difficult conversations is actually most of those skills you deploy in normal, happy, healthy conversations. So you could be practicing that rhythm and that structure and that skill set when you're coaching kids. It's the same skill set. It's around affirmation. It's around autonomy. It's around reflecting and trying to tune into what they're saying and trying to help the kid work out where they're stuck, so that the kid can ask for your help or problem solve themselves, whichever one of those is most appropriate for whatever you're trying to teach them at that moment. So I think that's the reactive stuff. I think the proactive stuff is around giving parents a voice, but giving parents a voice in a healthy, constructed way. One of the things I love about gymnastics is the fact that often you have different age groups kind of in the mix together, or in the training area together. I know sometimes in a big club you might have the under 7s and under 8s, but often you've got junior coaches around, and you've got great opportunity there. You say you can't employ a full-time wellbeing person. No, you can't, but you can teach your teenagers to help them look after the well-being of the younger kids, I'm not talking about crisis wellbeing stuff, but actually just starting to model. It's the thing that I look back on with most fondness about my daughter's gymnastic experiences. She was in an acro trio, and to start off with, excuse me if I butcher the as a front row forward who still can't do a roly-poly, this is dangerous ground for me. But
Forward roll, Richard.
Forward roll. So there you go. You see straight away, poor technique. Forward roll. So she was a top in a trio, and she had 2 teenage girls who she looked up to and were great kids. Yeah, sure, they were still going through teenage stuff, but they were great kids. And then as she got taller, she got really tall really quickly, she became a bottom. And then they had another younger kid, and the cycle repeated itself. And it was one of the things I used to love going to see their display evenings or the competitions, was this just like vertical age group support and peer mentoring that I think other sports don't necessarily have, because they're all in age group teams, so they don't necessarily mix, whereas gymnastics have that. So don't just have those young people around as mentors, intentionally teach them. Again, give them a little bit of the structure. We want your challenge, older kids tonight, is to find out 3 things that each of the under 8s loved about school, or one thing that was a challenge or whatever. And then the second part of the challenge is to share what you found challenging when you were at school at that age. So we're normalizing challenge. Or find out which is your favorite training routine, which is your least favorite, and then share which was your least favorite and why, and share which was your favorite and why. So again, we're just using the teenagers, we're upskilling them, we're making them better leaders, better mentors, giving them a better depth, and then we're helping them start to mentor the kids in that. And then I would feed back to the parents what you've had the junior mentors doing, and you get the parents repeating the same conversations. So again, we're just starting to be honest about challenging conversations. We're starting to show that we care about, we're normalising that part of the gymnastics journey is a bit, and part of it is brilliant. And that's not to be afraid of or shied away from. And I would then pick, if you're in a small club with limited resources, I would pick 1 or 2 parents who are clearly really for you, and I would get them to be your like parent reps, for want of a better phrase, and get them voluntarily to put those questions in the WhatsApp group, and to be reminding parents, like, actually these are the processes for sharing concerns, or the big competitions coming up. We know that coaches get lots of challenging emails about this. Can we just encourage you to hold that email, or think about these three, is my concern subjective? Is it fair? Do I need to wait 24 hours before I ask it, for example? Those off the top of the head. But, get parents dropping these things into WhatsApp groups as the parent rep. Not there to answer all those questions on behalf of the club or defend the club. The staff can do that, but just there to promote healthy culture. Yeah. Is that going to remove all of it? Absolutely not. No, it's because there's somebody who's still going to, behave like a child in the room, because we all do that at times when there's a high pressure moment. But hopefully you've got enough of a community spirit around to deal with that, and be really honest with each other about what the high performance moments do. Yeah. Because one of the things that always amuses me is I think kids are the calmest about the high performance moments. I think it's the coaches and the adults that get far more stressed about the big competitions than the kids do. But then the coaches and the parents are so like, oh, big competition, that they infect the kids with this. The kids know it's a big competition. Yeah. They might be a bit more nervous, and they know it's a big opportunity, but I think they're okay with that until they talk to their coaches and their parents who, this week we better train really hard. Because I've been training really hard for the last, it's so I think being honest about those big competition moments, and coaches and clubs trying to set a balanced response to the excitement and the pressure that comes with it.
I feel the same on that point. With regards to just the progression of, which pathway, and a lot of the kids, they just love going in the gym and doing gymnastics and having fun. And I think if the narrative around that from the parents was more, just go and enjoy yourself, have fun, then actually we probably would keep more kids in the sport. But I think the parents constantly wanting, when are they moving up to the next group, or why can't they do this skill yet? I think it bothers the parents essentially more than the kids. The kids would be pretty happy if there was just a different narrative around that. And organically, some of those kids are going to move up anyway, whether or not the parents talking lots about it. They are organically going to keep moving up. So I wonder how much we create the problem in the kid's mind of, but she's really disappointed she's not moving up. It's just like, well, actually, she probably just would have really loved to come to gym and keep progressing, and she's got a good group of mates. She's having fun here. So when has this become about, when does a 9-year-old become really attached to progressing to a new level of sport? Unless they're hearing that narrative all the time, I don't think they do.
No, and I think I think of some young people I know some pretty driven 9-year-olds, but they're very rare.
Yeah, and they've got
rare
peers, and they've got kids that they might look up to. So I'm not saying that it's everyone.
No. I think you're right. I think they're outliers in the normal population. Sure. I think for me, the key thing you've talked about is if they're still with their mates. I think that's the time that they don't. If their mates all suddenly progress and they're left with a group, that I think is when it stings, and that's also okay. And then the challenge for the coaches is, well, actually, we know that hurts, but we want you to mentor these, and we're going to give you a job. I mean, I find giving kids a job is not one of those like school monitor jobs, which are just a box ticking, a badge thing, but give them a real job, actually genuinely, we know you're disappointed about that. However, while you're here, you'll get there, probably will get there. But in this time between, we want you to do this job, and we want you to do it well, and we'll teach you how to do this job, whether it's the warm-up, whether it's looking after, whether it's supporting, or whatever, that actually they feel like, actually, I've still got a role here in that disappointment. But most of the time, they're still going to be surrounded by their friends. And I think you're right. I think that is where that lack of pressure. I always wonder, in any sport, it would be really cool, wouldn't it, just to give all the kids a big bit of paper and say, design the perfect gymnastics club for your age group. What would it look like? Design the perfect season. What would it look like? And I wonder I'd be genuinely curious. And then give the parents and give the coaches the same thing, and then let them have a conversation about it. I think the thing that frustrates me about the pressure about moving up is that then creates an anxiety in the kids about not meeting mum and dad's expectations or coaches' expectations. Yeah. And, we're talking about a sport that requires a significant level of physical skill and attainment. And some kids just naturally that fits a bit more than others, doesn't it? And some are going to progress really beautifully and others aren't because of body shape or whatever happened to them between when they were 0 and 4 years old and how much activity they did as a family or whatever. So I think, look, sport does have selective moments. It does have moments of high pressure. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think it's that becoming the narrative, like you say, that is a real challenge. And it's sad because, like we say, we sports that we love are just hemorrhaging kids at that time when they feel like they can get enough of a voice to say, I'm going to stop now.
You created a nice bit of content on your Instagram that I was watching. It was about the importance of self-awareness and how we talk about that a lot, but you'd also mentioned about institutional awareness.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit about that, about what you were referring to with institutional awareness?
Well, I think obviously self-awareness is understanding, I just find self-awareness is understanding, like, who am I in the room? Why did I come in the room? How am I impacting those in the room? You know, and no one's perfectly self-aware, but that's kind of institutional self-awareness is like, actually, who have we put in the room? How do they feel about us? And what boundaries and parameters are we putting in the room? And I think that sports institutions, and I get to work with some of the big names in UK sport, often minimise the power of the badge. So you might have superb coaches, really people-orientated, young people-orientated, great development-orientated coaches who are not just out for a trophy cabinet full of awards, but the badge is so powerful that takes a lot for parents to see past.
Right.
And I think the institutional self-awareness piece is like, what is our reputation? Not like, is it good or bad, but actually, what do people perceive is our culture here?
What we're known for.
What we're known for, how you fit in, what success is thought of in this group. Where are the cliques? Because there are cliques in every organisation, and you can't stop that. But, you know, are we aware enough of what's going on? Are we aware enough of our coaching style and how that comes across? Are we aware enough of how we deal with conflict? You know, are we really pally, or are we really like, I was working again with a different Premiership football club recently. Their senior lead for their academy was a really friendly person beforehand. So parents kind of came and offloaded lots of stuff. The new person is a bit more distant, keeping parents standoffish. And I think, to be honest with you, probably somewhere in between the two is probably the healthiest way. But heck, they're two individuals with their different skill sets. So it's interesting going and listening to the parents say, oh yeah, it's really different. It's got really cold here. And I think actually, I don't think it's got cold. It's just you don't have as much immediate access to that one person as you did have before. But again, it's that awareness of what that difference has made. And for this academy manager, he knew that he was different. I was like, well, have you told the parents you know you're different? And have you given the parents this reassurance of how they can still have access to you and what to have access to? Or the process. He's like, no, they need to talk to my staff now. Okay, cool. But have you told them that? Oh no. Well, how do they know? You know, so it's so he was institutionally aware, as he could see my predecessor was like that. I'm like this. This is what we've been like as a club. But okay, now let's just talk to the parents. So I think that institutional awareness of how we market ourselves, you know, so if you're a gymnastics club and you market yourself as really high achievement of success in terms of medals, positioning, you know, what is that saying to prospective parents? If you then are going to moan that parents are hyper-driven about performance, well, you set that up. What you market,
that is your narrative.
That is your narrative, yeah. And I'm not saying that narrative is, well, probably wouldn't be my narrative, but you have a choice as a gymnastics club to make that your narrative. But don't be upset if you attract highly hyper-driven competitive individuals, and then when those competitive individuals don't get competition like they want, they'll be very competitive in the way in which they express their frustration, or they'll go somewhere else. They'll chase a better club. And so someone might come to you for a few years, feel like you're not getting the results out of their kid, and they'll go elsewhere. But if your narrative is about results, then that will be part and parcel of the journey. People will switch in and out of your institution. So I think it's just understanding how we land as an organisation. And I think the best way you can get self-aware is by asking trusted people, what are we like? You know, and I'm a big advocate of getting a bunch of parents in a room for a coffee and a pizza or a donut and just saying, come on, be honest, what are we like? And if that's too broad a question, say, here's our club's vision statement or coaching philosophy. Is that what you experience at home?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that here's what we want to give young boys and girls as an experience through our gymnastics club. Is this how it lands at home? Because if this isn't how it lands at home, tell us, we want to know. Oh yeah, you say you're really nurturing, caring. You are in these moments, and in these moments we don't feel it. Oh right, okay. So we've now got a choice of that information. We either say, yep, that is how we are, and we need to be a bit more honest, fine, or we need to change, or actually they've misunderstood, and we need to be better at communicating who we are. And all three of those are valid options. And I've seen these groups run in schools, in sports clubs, and they're the chairs, the people who lead this, the academy managers or school directors of sport who run the best ones, they're the least defensive, but they're the happiest to be boundaried as well. So we don't give this group power. We don't say, review our document, rewrite it for us, and you get to sack the 3 coaches who aren't doing it. No, not at all. But we get to sit down away from that emotive thrust of competition, and we get to say, go on, how are we doing as a club? Mm-hmm. And do you know what also, though, Neil? You'll get tons of great feedback. Go back to what we said earlier, and you'll get so many encouragements for your team that you'll be able to share. I just had a parents' meeting, and they said all these things about what we're doing. Yep. They are seriously impressed and encouraged. You're going to get loads of marketing material, because everything that trips out of the parents' mouths in that meeting is, you're brilliant at this, you're brilliant at that, you're brilliant at that. Okay, great. These are the words that we want to do. I mean, I would say, at the end of every season, you should at least do an electronic review. What 3 words would you say sum up our club? What's our super strength as our club? What's our coaching style as a club? How good are we at handling difficult conversations? How good are we at comms? How timely are we at comms? And even just some simple sorts of questions like that will give you a little bit of data. And then I would just say to 10 trusted parents across different age ranges and different abilities, hey, we've got this feedback from this questionnaire. Can we invite you in can we get a curry all together or something? And can we just chat about the results? It's all anonymized.
Yeah.
What's that word? No, anonymous.
Anonymous. Anonymized, I think, is also
it didn't feel right. And we'll just chat. So it's not just on paper. We get a broader narrative.
Yeah.
We get to expand on it a bit more. And again, you can tell that's because I want to go back and encourage our coaches. But that meeting has no power to change anything. The power to change stuff still lies with the staff, with the coaches, with the club owners. But it's just about saying, who are we? And I think the reality is we all develop a skill set to cope with the context that we're in. Mm-hmm. And often those skills, like we said earlier, for time-poor people are to enable us to firefight and respond to the different challenges. And so that means that sometimes we're probably not quite aware of how some of those things land. Mm-hmm. And so by doing a quick survey and asking parents, we'll be encouraged to see some of the skills we picked up are really helpful. But we might also discover a few little bits about ourselves and our club that we've built that isn't quite in line with how we'd want it to be. And for those of us who are a bit long in the tooth, sometimes because we've used the same coping strategy or skill set for a number of years to get through season after season, we don't quite see or perceive how it lands. Because it's worked, or working, we kind of assume it's okay. And actually, when some people point it out, you go, oh yeah, actually, with just a little tweak here, I might be even better. But I'm really encouraged at the same time with all the good stuff that's come up.
I love it. Richard, this has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
You've provided enormous amounts of value in a 40-minute episode. So thank you very much. And thanks for the good work that you're doing as well. I know it's having a great ripple effect amongst the community and the clubs, and enormous value, and just look forward to continuing to follow your work. Just while we've got the listeners' attention, just want to name your Instagram account, Non-Perfect Dad.
Non-Perfect Dad, Non-Perfect Dad.
Good source. And then you've got a website, of course, as well.
Yeah, Non-Perfect Dad as well. It's a bit out of date.
.co.uk or .com?
.co.uk.
.co.uk, nonperfectdad.co.uk.
Yeah.
Good resources for people to sort of check out the work that you do. And the name of your book?
The name for our book is Conversations for the Journey. It's 40 conversations parents can have with their children on the way to or from sporting moments. And I think as a previous gymnastic dad, you can spend quite a bit of time in the car, can't you?
And, straight after a session as well, when emotions could potentially be high. So it's a great book, very readable, very easy to digest. I've got it over here on the desk. You can sign it before you leave, actually.
Oh, you're privileged. And mate, thank you for having me. This, I mean, I've been on lots of podcasts, and this is the first one in an official studio, and I love it.
Thank you.
Been a great experience, and I find your content, even as a non-gymnastics sport parent, and the stuff you put out about clubs, always just on point. It makes me think as a business owner, and it makes me think about someone in sports. So I really appreciate what you do as well.
I appreciate you, and thanks for the kind words.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's do this again.
Definitely.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Gymnastics Growth Show. Now, if you're an ambitious gymnastics coach with a hunger for self-improvement, check out my Gymnastics Growth Academy, where you'll find members from over 40 countries, all accessing my masterclasses, courses, templates, live community calls, exercise libraries, and so much more. It's a program that members have described as life-changing. So why don't you check it out for yourself? Head to gymnasticsgrowth.com to learn more. See you on the inside.